Every time I walk into a retail store, I still see one thing hasn't changed for decades is the checkout line. And I often wonder, with all the innovations happening in retail, why are we still waiting in queues? The questions perfectly sets the stage for today's episode. I'm your host Anurag, and today we are diving into a topic that reshapes how we experience shopping, the future of retail checkout and in-store innovation. I'm joined by someone who's literally changing the way we shop. Mustafa Khanwala, the founder and CEO of MishiPay. From London to the Middle East, MishiPay is helping retailers blend online convenience with offline experiences, redefining what the store of future really looks like. So Mustafa, welcome to Let's Talk E-Commerce. It is a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
Amazing. So let's start with the first question, and I want to take you back into the history when you started MishiPay. And if you could tell us briefly about how you started, what was your journey, and what is the problem that you're trying to solve here?
I started now 10 years ago, right? So we just finished a decade and we celebrated our 10th anniversary
Amazing.
this August.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. 10 years ago, I was 22 when I was starting out. I was finishing my master's degree in UCL. My background is very mixed, Indian origin, born in Kuwait, then moved to the UK in 2011. I did my mechatronic engineering and then my master's in engineering and finance at UCL. And I was headed into some graduate schemes. I had offers, Goldman, Barclays, KPMG. But I had the idea for MishiPay while waiting in a supermarket. It was in North London, just outside my university accommodation. And I waited 20 minutes to buy just one Coke at Lidl, the German discount supermarket.
Okay.
And I thought this doesn't make any sense. Surely what's possible in the cash register should be possible on my phone. Why can't I just scan the barcode of an item, pay for the item, and leave the store? And that was the start of MishiPay. A few months later, I had a basic but functional prototype. I incorporated the company in August 2015, brought in my co-founder, now our former CTO, in around October 2015, and started from there. We've come a long way. Things are very different now in terms of our overall product suite and what we are as a company. But from that first moment on till today, it's been an amazing journey.
Amazing. That's a very fascinating story, I must say. And I believe most of the innovation comes from real life experiences, and MishiPay is definitely one of them. So if you can define your aha moment during this journey, and what actually what made you start MishiPay, considering that you are solving specific business problems in the retail space. So if you can share some more insights.
I think there's been multiple aha moments if I think about it. Obviously, over 10 years, right? You don't just go on one innovation. There's multiple innovations along the way. The first one, though, was that, wait in a line. Everybody has waited in a queue. I myself, before that moment, had waited in a queue many times before. But something about it just made sense because I knew about, basic self-checkout machines that were available. Still, there was a line at them. I had known and done some projects around RFID during my time in the University of Manchester. And so I thought, if I could scan the barcode, pay for the item, and security could be handled by RFID. At the time, I didn't know about the complications of getting RFID into retail and how much more time it would need for the infrastructure to catch up. But it just made sense to me. I thought that, surely this is possible. It was idea number 24 at the time. Okay. I've had another 24 ideas since then, but something about this just made sense, right? What really clicked was, and I oftentimes say this, when I'm mentoring other entrepreneurs, is that you know your end goal, right? For me, the end goal was making sure nobody has to wait in a line ever again at any store around the world. But you also need to know the first two steps, right? So tomorrow, if I have an idea for a flying car, I say, okay, I want to develop a flying car, but I don't even know the first two steps. It's very difficult for me to work on the idea, no matter how interesting, no matter how exciting. Either I can go learn, build those skills and then start, or I have to think about something which is more closer to what I know. And that's what was good about MishiPay, that I knew how to start, right? Whether it was the RFID part in terms of security, whether it was the app development, which I'd already begun to, tinker and play with a few app development ideas and projects, I could start by myself, right? So I started that first step. And then eventually, obviously, you need help. But I knew the first two steps to starting, right? Building my MVP, getting it into a real retail store. Those were the two steps, and I could just get started straight away.
Sure. As you mentioned, you started your experience from London, and a lot of learning in GCC actually came from the Western world. So, when you compare GCC market to the Western markets, specifically in terms of the checkout experiences, do you see that experience broken in GCC, or do you see a different trend which is there in the region?
There are a few things which are following along from Europe or the US. Europe is even more advanced than the US when it comes to payments infrastructure.
Okay.
But what we've seen in all the markets, this includes places like India or even the Far East, Singapore, for example, or China, of course, or Hong Kong, is that they're able to leapfrog. Right, they're late to start with, but they're able to leapfrog certain things. So, for example, in the UAE, you had a much shorter period between people using chip and pin cards
Okay.
or swipe to Apple Pay, Google Pay.
Okay.
Right? Whereas in the UK, we had a long time in the middle where we were only using contactless before Apple Pay came in and we started to use it. But here, people switched straight away or very quickly from normal checkout into Apple Pay, from chip and pin into Apple Pay.
Okay.
Same thing you would see in retail, right? That people went from very legacy on-premise POS systems
Yeah.
to full cloud-based POS with self-checkout.
Yeah.
Because also the market dynamics were correct. So one of the things to take a look at, which follows along when it comes to our business, self-checkout or mobile POS or modular cash registers, all of the full POS suite, right, of products that you would have, you need to understand three elements: the payments infrastructure, the current ERP, POS infrastructure, and the cost of labor.
Okay.
Right? You need these three things to work out, where payments should be at a point where cash is less than 20%, preferably even less than 10%. UA is certainly there, and most of the GCC is also in the same direction. You need e-commerce or ERP, POS infrastructure going into cloud-based products or ones which have API integrations available, or even at least SFTP integration, not fully locked down systems, right? That's also happening. You're seeing Microsoft Dynamics, Oracle, SAP doing great business in the Middle East. And the last piece is the cost of labor, where the cost of one cashier has to be more than about 4 self-checkouts. Because that way, if you replace one cashier with 2 self-checkouts, you still save 50%, right? That's the math at the beginning, which creates the right inflection point for self-checkout to grow in a market. And we have all of those, right? In the UAE. UAE, the rise in the cost of labor has happened through a natural increase in the cost of living, especially over the last 3 years. Saudi, it's more inorganic factors, Saudization, for example, which meant that every in-store cashier in a supermarket has to be a Saudi citizen. So their costs, rose significantly very quickly. And other markets are starting to catch up with similar reasons as UAE or Saudi.
Sure, makes sense. We'll deep dive more into the GCC context specifically, but I want to draw your attention from a understanding perspective. When we say in-store innovations, what do you actually mean by in-store innovation? Is it just technology? Is it experience, or is it a combination of both?
It's a combination of both, obviously, when it comes to in-store innovation, but it is with the same problem to be solved, right? Whether it's through technology, whether it's through experiences, the idea is still for the customer to be able to buy the product that they came in to buy as conveniently as possible or as excitingly as possible, right? You really see that division inside the in-store experiences. Either you know what you want to buy. At that point, it's about how quickly can we get you to purchase the product and leave the store, save you time that you can use on other things. Or for you to spend time inside the store browsing with your discovery, making that part and the interaction with the store associate as good as possible, right? So that you purchase the item then at the peak of your experience, right? Which is when you've selected something, you said, you know what, I love this, I want to buy it. That's when the retailer's responsibility is to allow you to buy it right then and there, close you at the peak. But getting you to the peak then is all the other requirements inside the store, right? Making your experience as good as possible, from discovery to clienteling, endless aisle possibilities, and finally also purchase, whether it's through a mobile POS or through other means of purchase inside the store.
Sure. I have personally experienced in a lot of stores wherein the queue is crazy and you can't just stand out there, and you end up moving to a different store, or you
Yeah.
plan to cancel your shopping experience. So from a personal perspective, I think technology definitely plays an important role. That brings me to another question, which is more on the future of retail checkout. So Mustafa, the term frictionless checkout is everywhere. What it means to retailers and shoppers in general.
Frictionless checkout, I think it means something slightly different to a shopper versus a retailer. For a
Mhm.
shopper, frictionless checkout has to be about convenience of getting in and out as quickly as possible in a store once they know what they want to buy. But it also means less friction in every aspect of their journey, right? Less friction at the trial room, less friction when trying to discover products and find things, less friction when at the point of payment, exactly, right? No matter the type of payment method that they're using. So, at every aspect, the shopper's journey has to be made frictionless towards whatever they want to do, right? We first think about it in terms of a checkout perspective, which is all about, things like self checkout, scan, pay and go, RFID self checkout. But you can also think about it from the slower checkout methods like a mobile POS, which is all about discovery, the staff spending time with you, or trial room checkout that happens. Trial room discovery where RFID is integrated into the trial room and you can call for new products right then and there because you have really good visibility into your stock, right? So all these aspects matter to the shopper. From a retailer's perspective, now they have to enable these frictionless experiences for their shopper, no doubt. And they can do that through either buying or building, right? And we've seen good aspects of both. Typically, though, those that have bought have seen a better, faster implementation, cheaper implementation. But there are certain very large retailers who have also built, it's taken them longer, it's been expensive, but they've done a good job eventually. However, you also have to think about frictionless checkout from a B2B perspective when it comes to the retailer, right? For them, frictionless checkout is about reducing the number of headaches that they have
Yeah.
during their checkout, right? Reducing the number of double payments that then require refund, reducing the number of times where reconciliation does not match, right? Reducing the ability to reducing the number of times that integration is a problem where they need to see the number of transactions match exactly based on whatever payment methods you're using or whatever checkout methods you're using to their final number within the ERP, right? These are the frictions from the retailer side when they look at checkout. And that's also something that's really important, but it's behind the scenes, right? So most people don't see it. It's not as glamorous, it's not as sexy, but it does matter a lot, especially when you're considering retailers with hundreds of thousands of stores and each of those stores having four, five, six checkouts, right?
Sure.
So that's where if they have problems on the back end, oftentimes you see their finance teams and their reconciliation teams blocking new innovations when it comes to checkout, saying, okay, if it's going to make my work harder, if it's going to mean 5 hours more every day for me or my team,
Yeah.
thank you very much. I don't care that it's frictionless for the shopper. I don't want to get that in, right? So it has to be also frictionless on the back end for the retailer to enable these technologies on the front end for their shoppers.
Very interesting to know the backend side of the frictionless checkout. And Mustafa, you speak to a lot of retailers in the region, right? There are multiple factors that influence the entire checkout journey, right?
Yeah,
Whether it is mobile, whether it is POS, scan and go, autonomous payment
yeah,
options, right?
true.
So, what are the top, let's say, three factors that influence the retailers the most
In the GCC or all over the world?
in the GCC context?
I think in the GCC, price is number one. probably, right? So they're much more cost conscious. Retailers generally all over the world are cost conscious, but I think in the GCC the cost comes up, very quickly. Similarly, actually, as we go eastward, because retailers are generally very cost conscious, so cost for sure. Time to implementation is the second one, right? Because this, in a way, is about cost, but it's more indirect cost,
Okay.
right? Because it's the opportunity cost that they could lose time actually deploying this in their stores, which means that the benefits are pushed away to later, as well as the time of their teams, right? They have a project team who's on this, they have other implementation teams. Those teams spending time on a project that keeps going longer and longer than it should means that those teams could not be on other projects, which could also be beneficial for the retailer. So for sure, cost, time to implementation, and which also comes together with ease of implementation,
Yeah.
right? And then in this market, they really care about proof points, already validated use cases, especially if those use cases are validated with global names and global retailers. Those matter a lot, right? For
Sure.
a retailer, because the GCC market is really dominated predominantly with franchisee operators, right? Most of the brands that we shop in here are brands coming in from the UK, from the
Yeah.
US, globally coming into the market. Of course, there's a very rapidly rising, in-house and local brands that are really coming up well across the UAE and Saudi, actually. Saudi, perhaps even more than the UAE, but they're starting from a very small base, right? So until they really become 30, 40, 50% of the market in retail, especially in-store retail, it's going to be a long time. Until then, the foreign brands will still continue to dominate. And that's where the franchisee operators really love to see experiences and technology that is already deployed somewhere else, preferably with one of their brands in another country. Right. So existing proof points and use cases, especially if they've been done in more developed markets, are highly valued in this one.
All right. This brings me to a couple of other questions in continuation to our discussion. You spoke about the time of implementation and the ease of implementation. So typically, what is the turnaround time for such implementations? Let's say how MishiPay does it versus other players in the market. That's question number one. And question number two, since you mentioned retailers are mostly franchisees, right? So the mandate on these checkout innovations, this come from the parent brand, or these are like local local thought driven decisions?
I think first on the implementation, our implementation actually takes only 2 weeks of development effort,
Amazing.
right? Not more than that, but it typically takes about 1 month at least to go live, from signing the contract to actually being live with a retailer. That's extremely fast, right? In an
Very fast.
in-store retail context. Sometimes it might take 2 months or 3 months because of the communication between the retailer and our teams, right? Which is, we've asked them for something, it's taken a week, or they've asked another vendor who's taken a week or 2 weeks. So those are the delays most of the time in communication and sharing information back and forth, right? If that's done quickly, we've been able to go live in, even 13 days. At the beginning of last year, we went live with MLSE Stadium in Toronto, which is the home of the Toronto Raptors and the Toronto Maple Leafs. We signed the contract on the 26th of Jan, and we went live, I think, on the 12th of February,
Wow.
just before Valentine's
Wow.
Day. So that was, a good 17-day rollout that happened very quickly in the real store with real payments and users. In a month, we had enough results, and in 2 months, we'd signed the rollout contract for the whole stadium.
Amazing.
So that's like the best and ideal use case, but that's because the retailer was willing to work with us every step of the way. They had just as much urgency about the project, about the whole project and the launch, as well as the benefit of the product to them and what they were looking for, right? Because they had a very clear goal in mind. That's when things really move quickly.
Amazing.
Now, coming to your other question about retailers in the UAE and who makes the decision when it comes to in-store checkout innovation or POS. It depends on the contract.
Okay.
Right. So it's really about whether the contract is what they call a push model, for
Okay.
example, where the franchisee operator really is just purely operating the store.
I
So
see.
they're responsible for finding the locations, renting the locations, providing the staff, but they do not control the tech inside the store, the design
Okay.
inside the store,
Okay.
or sometimes even the product procurement, right, in terms
I
of
see.
which SKUs. And so they have very little control in terms of what happens inside. This used to be the way that the largest brands used to enter the Middle East,
Okay.
right? They when they were coming in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, they would be dictating terms, right? Saying that, you know what, we know what we want to do, we know how to run our business, you better do things our way, right?
Okay.
And even today, if you look at the largest franchisee brand operations, they can control a lot of what goes inside the store.
Okay.
Now, what started to happen is that some franchisee operators, right, the biggest ones in the Middle East, Al Shaya, Al Futem, Majid Al Futem, Azadea Group, they started to become so big that they were able to then start to reverse the situation, right? The brands who were coming to them were smaller companies than they were themselves,
Interesting.
right? And so that's when things started to change, where they started to say, okay, no, we want the model where we will operate the store and we will control the technology that goes into the store. This obviously means that they also have a larger piece of the pie when it comes to, you know, revenue sharing or profit sharing at the end of the day, but it also gives them more control, right?
Sure.
So that's what started to change. So now a lot of the brands that you see in the malls, they will be using POS provided by these large franchisee operators. They may have one or two very large flagship brands that they signed a long time ago where they don't control the POS, but by and large, a lot of them, they do control the POS and the in-store technologies. They can make decisions. Sometimes the principal, which is the main brand, will have a say on it or a veto, but oftentimes if the brand is not bigger than the company themselves, then they won't even have that.
Amazing, amazing. That's a great insight and a new learning for me as well. So me as a layman, as a shopper, when I go shopping, the image that I have of a checkout is basically the queue which is there, which goes till the till you do the payment and you're out of the store. So according to you, what is the ideal image which is there in your mind when it comes to checkout in 2025?
I think the ideal image is the shopper leaving the store with a smile on their face,
Okay.
right? It doesn't matter how they've done the checkout. If they've done the checkout with a cash register, they've done the checkout with a self checkout, with a mobile POS, with a scan pay and go on their own phone. These things are simply the medium through which you're delivering the customer experience, which will keep evolving, right? And I cannot tell you that only one way is the right way. It could be that in some stores, the cash register is the perfect way for them to do the checkout, right? Because they don't have a lot of lines. They have, 10 people shopping there a day and they do not need anything else. I would still recommend them to go towards mobile POS because they can have the one-to-one interaction, the recommendations, the clienteling. But that may work for that store because their customers are still very happy. Right.
Okay.
So the best checkout is the checkout that makes your customers happy, that makes them buy the maximum that they could at the store, and makes them keep coming back. That, depending on your store, your traffic, your size, your type of product, will change.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Interesting. Very good answer, Mustafa. I've seen brands like Amazon Go who have gone completely autonomous, and then I go to Carrefour regularly. I do self checkout on the kiosk, and then there are brands like Dubai Duty Free who does scan and go and mobile payments, right?
Yes.
So what is the winning model for these retailers? As you mentioned, it depends on the size of the retailer, the traffic which is there in the store. But is there a winning model that a retailer must follow?
I mean, I would say the winning model is to be with MishiPay and
Okay.
use us for the technology that like Dubai Duty Free does. But no, I think, look, at the end of the day, retailers are, by and large, very good, right?
Yeah.
They're good at what they do. All these names that you've named are very successful businesses and been running for decades in the market. They know their customer, they know what to deliver to their customer. The winning model, in my opinion, though, having done this for the last 10 years, are retailers who can really pilot quickly,
Okay.
right? Because the one guarantee is that the experience you have for your customers today will not be adequate for your customers tomorrow, right? Their needs will keep evolving, whether it be on new payment wallets that they want to use, right? From like 5 years ago, there was no need for in-store retail to consider adding Tabby, Tamara kind of payments acceptance, right? That has changed now, and they have to start looking at that, especially where it's a high basket value, right? There was no need when you have a bunch of Chinese shoppers, you just needed Union Pay and you were good enough. Now they have to look at adding WeChat Pay, Alipay, right? Otherwise,
Yeah.
they will lose shoppers or lose transactions,
Sure.
right? So the truth is that these things will keep evolving. But retailers who win will be those who can adapt quickly because their systems internally are built to be able to adapt, right? That's also one of our biggest selling points at MishiPay, right? Is
Okay.
our flexibility that we can switch on new things very quickly.
Mm.
A new promotion we've never seen before, 2 days. A new loyalty program, 10 days. A new payment method we've never seen before, 2 weeks. That is what we really pride ourselves on, is that we still have that startup level agility, but with enterprise level reliability. This is typically the point at which retailers struggle, because if you consider especially a POS system of a retailer, it really needs to be bulletproof, right? A
Sure.
retailer can't have their POS go down for hours in a day.
Mm.
It does happen sometimes, but they really need that 99.999% uptime, right? The
Of
five
course.
nines
Yeah.
that they need. Because their stores, especially with high traffic and grocery, you mentioned people like Carrefour, they need that, right? If all their tills go down for 10 minutes, I remember once I was at my university, there was a lecture by the CEO of Sainsbury's at the time. This is 2015, 16. And he mentioned that if our tills go down for 10 minutes, we're dead, right? As a business, we just can't
Yeah.
afford for that to happen.
Yeah.
So that's how reliable they need to be. But oftentimes, when you have that reliability, you lose all the agility and adaptability towards those systems, right? So being able to do both is very difficult.
Yeah.
But those who can will win because they can then keep trying new things,
Yeah.
right? If tomorrow, let's say you tell me there's a superb way that I can increase my basket value by 20% at my retail store, and I am even not a very large one, even 100 store retail operator, I can't immediately put it in all 100 stores, right? For the
Yeah.
risk that something may actually go wrong, rather than increasing by 20%, you might reduce my basket value by 20%.
Yeah.
I can't afford that. What I would want to do is say, okay, let's put it in 10 stores or 2 stores, see the impact. If it's good, I'll keep increasing it. Now, doing this in e-commerce is comparatively much easier, right? Because you can start, you can A/B test with your users. It's a few lines of code that you
Yeah.
put on your website. But inside the store, there are many more considerations, right? Especially if you're deploying hardware towards that solution, then you need to involve your estate team. You need to involve, people for actually the installation. You need to consider where it will go, what will it replace within your store, because your store is full, right?
Yeah.
The design was made to maximize the space for products. So how are you going to deploy such a new technology, let's say, even if it's very good? There's a lot more thinking to do.
Yeah.
But some retailers have really adapted very well, creating certain stores that are their pilot locations, where they say that, okay, we will launch a pilot in less than 3 months, run it for 3 months maximum, see the results, and then decide the rollout. But if it takes you a year to just launch the pilot, then you're already falling way behind all your competitors who may be able to deploy faster than that.
Yeah.
Or you're forced to take a decision on a whim, saying that, okay, others are doing it, it may be good,
Yeah.
let's just put it everywhere, right? That's why you have disasters that happen, like, Lidl announced recently that they've spent and lost 500 million on SAP over the last 10 years because they were trying to make SAP adapt to their style of accounting, and they've spent that much money over that many years losing time, right? It would have been much easier if that could be done in a smaller instance. They could A/B test it, confirm, and then deploy. They would have saved hundreds of millions of pounds over, and a lot of time. Even more important, the time that they lost.
Yeah. I can't agree more on the flexibility and the adaptability part. As you mentioned, doing pilots and POCs helps retailer test the waters. But at the same time, I've seen a lot of retailers, they're struggling to roll out at scale once the pilots and the POCs are successful. What reason do you see behind these
Yeah, that's the second
failures?
challenge. You're right that
Yeah.
if they, launching the pilot quickly, being able to observe the results, that those are the first challenges, right? And making sure that you have results that you want to observe, right?
Yeah.
We've over the last 10 years oftentimes made the mistake launching a pilot and then the retailer's not sure if it was good or bad. And that should never be a question, right? It should be very clear that whether it was a failure or success, because you should have very clear criteria for failure or success. Now, let's say that you're successful from their rolling out, that should have been planned before, assuming success, right? Because you go into a pilot, even a retailer today, right? They go into a pilot wanting for it to be successful, or at least they should, right? Nobody should go into a pilot saying that, you know what, I have no idea and I don't care whether it's successful or not, right? If they really care about the success of the pilot and that's important to the business, that rollout should already be planned. You should know whether you're rolling out country by country, if it's a multinational retailer, or are you rolling out store by store based on the size of the store,
Makes
the
sense.
sales at the store, what really is the factor, because it's different for different retailers, right? Also, what are all your dependencies? Because if it requires certain hardware to be in the store and a layout change in the store, that's a really difficult thing to do, and yes, it will take multiple years for them to be fully rolled out.
Yeah.
But if it's something that can be rolled out within existing store environments, whether that's the hardware in the store or the layout, then that's much faster. And it's about making sure that you can do that in a remote way. They would also set, and obviously as the provider you should have your templates for doing this, right? Oftentimes when a retailer comes to us about rolling out our technology, we're the ones who tell them how we do it at other retailers of their size, of their type, within their geography, because we know, right? Doesn't mean that the retailers have not done other POS or POS technology rollouts before, but it helps for them to see what is your ideal way of rolling out, and then how can you adjust towards what works for them,
Sure.
right? But if that's not there, then the question is that is there really a strong interest from the retailer in rolling out your technology?
Yeah.
And I would wait to question that before you jump into the project, right? In the beginning when we started, we were really happy to get any contract for any pilot with any retailer, right? Because that's what you want to
That's how
start
we
with.
should
You know what? Anybody who wants to work with us, let's go.
Yeah.
But as you mature as a business, as your resources become more valuable, your time becomes more valuable, your emphasis on profitability becomes more important, then you start to consider these things before, right? And you have your experience and maturity as a business because you've done it so many times before, you
Yeah.
know what works. So you should ask these questions, even if it means you delay a contract signing or you might even lose a contract. I would argue that that's worth it because you need to know what you're going into makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And that also brings me to another perspective wherein I see retailers getting too futuristic with the checkout experiences. For example, we spoke about Amazon, right?
Yeah,
So
Amazon Go. Yeah.
autonomous stores, right? I haven't seen it much in the region and also
It's
in
been
the
a big
Western
struggle.
world. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting when it came out. As an engineer, I love it. Right, it's great technology, very very good experience. You walk in, pick up something, you walk out. You just have one validation at the beginning, and that's it.
Yeah.
It's interesting technology, but that's all it is, right?
But
Really
is it
good.
realistic?
It's not realistic, right? It's not practical.
Yeah.
As an engineer, I love it. As someone who has sold to retailers for the last 10 years, I know it just is not practical at the moment, right? It's just way too expensive. If a 1,000 square foot store would cost $250,000 to start
Wow.
with, and
That's a lot
then
of
there's
money.
lots of running costs. That's way too much money, right? There's only so many chocolates and chips that you can sell within that space, and at the end of the day, it just doesn't pay back.
Yeah.
Right, and you looked at it with Amazon's own plans, right? Amazon Go was launched with a lot of fanfare and with a plan for thousands of stores in a few years. And since then they've started to shut down more and more of those stores. They've now announced that they're shutting down all the stores in the UK. But as a technology, they've started to sell it a lot more B2B, but in specific use cases where price is not the ultimate factor. For example, in stadiums, right? In sports stadiums where you have a very limited time to actually buy something, which is, during the halftime or during any break periods, they're starting to see a good interest because people want to just quickly come in and walk out. And the stadium itself is all about maximizing the fan experience, right? Because they have other ways of ROI through their tickets, and they can mark up the items a lot more than you would at a normal grocery store. So those kinds of use cases are seeing some ROI of autonomous checkout. I don't think it's completely going away. But I think it's simply finding what could be the niche use cases where it makes sense. And that's why Amazon is still selling it as a B2B product to other retailers who would make who would be able to make better use of it and get ROI from it versus traditional grocery retailers.
Okay, so apart from these niche use cases, you don't see the future of autonomous checkout implementing at a scale. I mean,
No, I see more practical implementations of it. I would say that the technology itself of computer vision is great, and there's some really good use cases, right? We have some ourselves with computer vision on self checkout machines, but I think the first best use case is in theft prevention, not fully autonomous checkout, right? So the complication and the cost comes when you have to use the cameras to detect who you are, what you're picking into your basket, and then charge you for it, and exactly which items. But if I reduce the scope a little bit and I say, okay, I need to know what items you've picked, then I can say, okay, not exactly which items you've picked. I just need to know which categories of items and the quantity for each category. Now the scope is reduced a lot more, right? The computational power required is less, and the types of cameras are much lower quality that you need. You could potentially start using existing CCTV inside the store. Now I just need to compare and match that basket that I'm seeing through the cameras against your basket with whichever checkout you're using, whether it's a scan and go, whether it's a traditional POS with a cash register, whether it's a self checkout kiosk. The idea is I can just compare, and when I see a discrepancy, have someone intervene.
okay,
Right? So it could be a great way to get rid of weighing scales, which are used for security at grocery stores, get rid of exit entry gates at a lot of these places. Also, find better ways for those retailers who cannot afford RFID on each and every item, like grocery, actually find theft. Not just theft in self checkout, but theft generally across their stores. So I think the first use case of computer vision for scale in grocery stores is for theft prevention, but as a specific theft prevention tool in combination with existing POS systems or POS systems that you can deploy.
sure. You spoke about computer vision, right? Very, very interesting to know, technologies like computer vision and other innovations happening in retail generates a lot of data, right? How you can use that data as a retailer to improve the customer experience.
There's a lot of ways, mainly to understand, what your customers are really looking for and what more can you do to give that to them faster, better, in a way that maybe they haven't even thought of yet, right? We are doing this by using our AI agent that we've been working on to put it into our MishiPay dashboard, where in the back office, previously, retailers would simply see analytics that they would then have to export into Excel or Power BI or other tools in order to convert that data and analytics into insight, right? And then action on that insight.
Sure.
What we're trying to do is reduce that to make sure that the insight and the actions on the insight, or at least recommended actions, can go straight into our back office dashboard. right?
Okay.
And that's what we're able to do today with AI, because we can see across the stores the types of baskets being created, the types of purchases that are happening, which items are best selling. So these things, which previously would go all the way to the headquarters, then you have a business analyst team, then they produce the results and the insights of what to do, instead can go directly to the store manager, who doesn't have access to all those tools, but they have access to simply an AI chat that they can talk to in natural language and ask what's going on inside their store for any aspect of their store's sales, and then ask for insights in terms of what to do, which items should go on clearance or sale, which items can be marked up, which promotions or discounts should be created, right? That would be really exciting for a next step where store managers can do that themselves.
Okay.
Right. And it will happen. It won't be better than the best store manager, but it'll be better than your worst store manager,
Sure.
because the
Makes
idea is
sense.
that you can level up everybody to a minimum standard.
Yeah.
Right. This used to be done, if you look at the traditional bakala in the UAE,
Yes.
or you look at a kirana store in India. The idea is that people who used to run it themselves, owner operators, would see these things, they would have it in their head, and they would use that insight that they've collected over years of experience and knowledge. But store managers who do not own the store, who are across hundreds of stores or thousands of store estates,
Yeah.
it's very difficult for them to have that same level of insight or even action on that insight. This will allow them to get to that level.
Sure. But the biggest question is, are these retailer crossing the privacy lines? Are they violating the data confidentiality, or do you think it is well within the
No, this
range?
back office insights are well within the regulations. There is no need for them to involve any personally identifiable information, any PII. They can use existing data that they have access to, and it's their data, right?
Sure.
As a retailer, in terms of their sales as a business. Now, where you need to action on that insight, where a customer is involved. For example, if I know through the loyalty program, a customer who's visiting very often is very interested in a certain type of product, and I have a new launch, I want them to come to my store. Now you're starting to get into a question of privacy,
Okay.
right? And whether that requires customer consent, which can it be default yes, or does it have to be default no? That really depends on the region.
Sure.
Right, we've seen this even when we are GDPR compliant, we're CCPA compliant. We've seen that deploying in the US, deploying in Europe. That different states in the US, different countries in Europe have slightly different ways of implementing the regulation, and you need to make sure you're in line with that. But it's not really a blocker per se, because at the end of the day, if the customer is consenting and willingly signing up into your program, that's because they want to see that.
Sure.
Right. I was at a panel recently where I was saying that a question, because people always say, oh, is it too creepy, or is it too invasive? But there's really a ratio of like creepiness to helpfulness, right? Or invasiveness to helpfulness, where the more helpful you are, the more invasive of creepy you're allowed to be, right? Because if you think about it, we all had that experience, right? Where we're talking to our friends about something, or our partners about something, and it's we see an ad for exactly what we're talking about on Instagram right afterwards, right?
Yeah.
But and we feel like, oh, I was just talking about this. But when the ad is very relevant to what you actually were looking for, you don't mind, right? You're happy that it's there, that it's okay. The app overall, Instagram, is so useful that you don't care that they have a little bit more invasiveness, because you actually want to use it, right? You like it, you enjoy the usage of the
Sure.
application. The same way, if a retailer is giving you insight, and depending on the legality in every jurisdiction, you need to be making sure that you are compliant. But if you're compliant and the user wants the information that you're sending them, and let's say you have a great hit rate, over 80%, over 90%, then there's no problem with actually getting to them and giving them that information, right? If I really am interested in a product, and a retailer tells me at the right time about that product, I won't mind whether it's a WhatsApp message or even a call to me, because I would be like, yeah, I was looking for that.
Sure. Sure. As you rightly mentioned, in this era of digital technology and e-commerce, all the digital brands leading from the front. What is the future of physical retail? Do you see that merging into the digital ecosystem, and people, are talking about phygital experiences and omni-channel
Yeah.
experiences? According to you, what is the future?
See, we already have digital and omni-channel experiences. I think that for sure they will keep increasing, right? People shop online, they shop inside the store, they shop across their mobile and their or over the phone even now. There's always going to be a multitude of channels, but the physical store channel is still, even after so many years of e-commerce growing well, is still the dominant force when it comes to retail.
Yeah.
Right? It's still the largest piece of the pie, especially in the GCC. If you think about it, it's like over 90%, over 95% in some of the countries. So it's still a very, very big piece, right? And I don't believe that it will reduce all of a sudden to below 50%, right?
Yeah.
So physical store shopping will still be the number one for a long time to come. Within that physical store, the changes that we will see, how digital will get more involved, whether it is you being identified as soon as you enter the store, you being able to pay in multitude of different ways, being able to have home delivery from inside the store. These experiences will keep coming in and improving your in-store journey, but it will still be an in-store journey that will be the predominant way for people to shop.
Sure. Especially in this part of the world where
Especially in
people still
this
like
part of the
to
world.
shop in the
Yeah.
mall.
Even everywhere. I mean, the UK is one of the most advanced e-commerce markets in the world, and still physical store shopping is over 75%, right?
Sure.
Of the overall transactions that happen across the country. So it's not reducing as fast as people think. And in fact, it may stop reducing at all, right? Because people are enjoying the in-store experiences as long as the stores can keep innovating and improving those.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Also, Mustafa, I want to know. Let's talk about the advisory side of your role, and I want you to be in the shoes of a consultant or advisor.
Okay.
And if you have to advise a retailer on the next 3 to 5 years roadmap on adopting new age technologies, what those three advices would be?
Without knowing who the retailer is, it's a bit harder to do that. I would say that I would need to know their existing estate.
Okay.
But my first advice to any retailer, especially it's generic, would be make sure you have the ability to pilot new technologies quickly and create a minimum number of pilots that you will do every year, right? On all your big problems. So create three big problems that don't create, but find the three big problems within your business, discover which are your three biggest problems every year, and say that you will conduct at least one pilot on solving each of them. The guarantee is that all of them will not be successful, but within them, the ones that are successful will transform your business over 3 to 5 years, especially if you keep doing that every year, right? Every year without fail, you go ahead, pick out your top three problems in the business that year, pilot solutions against those problems, whether in-house or through external vendors. You go ahead and do that. And towards doing that, you need to decide a part of your retail store estate that will be used towards these pilots, and a team that can do that quickly, right? Because if the pilots themselves take a year to figure out, you're already in the next year, next set of problems, next set of pilots. You will never be able to do it, right? Sure. You need to be able to do it within a deadline. That for sure would be my number one top advice. The second would be to be aware of every upcoming technology trend that's there, right?
Okay.
Doesn't mean you need to adopt it. For sure, that's the wrong way. But you should at least be aware of what's happening, right? Go take a look at the autonomous stores, take a look at the RFID self-checkouts that are there, the best technologies that are out there in the use cases. Generally, a retailer should be aware, because it will come up, right, within the boardroom in terms of what can be done inside the store. At that time, if you've seen the best, then you know, okay, what you should emulate towards, right?
Sure.
And then I would, and a lot of retailers already do this, but if they weren't doing it, I would create their ideal customer journey inside the store, right? And there'll probably be 2 or 3 depending on the type of customer personas, but not enough retailers think about the ideal customer journey, even if it's not possible today, right? But at least create the idealistic journey first.
Sure.
And if money was no object, what would you have your in-store experience look like? And from there, work towards what is possible today.
Yeah. Amazing. Super practical advices. I'm sure retailers listening to this podcast will learn a lot from these suggestions and they implement as well. So, Mustafa, this brings me to the last section of the podcast. And my personal favorite, of course, excited for this one. This is called Rapid Fire Round,
Okay.
where I'll ask you some quick questions and I would expect some
Yeah,
very
let's
quick
do it.
answers. Yeah.
I'll try my best.
All right. So, the first one is online or offline, which will dominate in 2030?
Offline.
Okay. And why?
Because I don't think 2030 is far enough away for us to see a change. Today, offline dominates. It will also dominate in 2030.
Makes sense. Have you seen any overrated retail innovation so far in your experience?
A lot of overrated retail innovations. Yeah, I've seen a lot. You want me to name a few?
If you can, I think autonomous is one of them.
Autonomous
definitely
could be one of them.
Yeah.
Although as a technology, it is very difficult to do, and it is a good technological achievement. Not so much when it comes to practical retail use cases or impact. The back in the day, another one was beacons, right? Beacons, Bluetooth beacons, Wi-Fi beacons were the big thing that everybody was working towards. Again, the problem was infrastructure, the fact that you have to deploy so much inside the store, it really fizzled out. So they were very overhyped back in the day. But I think none were more overhyped while being useless than the metaverse. I think that was the biggest one that I was so surprised about. I was asked about it on a panel at the end of 2022, that metaverse. And I said the impact to retailers in this room of the metaverse is zero. And really, they have no business, wasting time on that, because we had Facebook spending 10 billion in the metaverse and it was a complete write-off. But for the company the size of Facebook, that's a bet that they can take. That's a risk they can take. But retailers and all those ones who were talking about metaverse and then Web3, the projects were completely impractical, didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And I remember we were at a retail conference in Vegas, and I was being told by the retailer there that, if you have any projects in metaverse, I can approve them immediately. We're doing 25 projects on metaverse, and
Okay.
all of them were useless.
Okay.
All of them didn't result in anything. So I think that was a big, very impractical one that people started to get very hyped about for no reason.
I agree. AI or human touch?
Human touch powered by AI,
Wow.
I would say.
That's amazing. Dubai or London?
Oh, I don't know if I can go against London, but
That's a
I
tough
love
one
Dubai.
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, Dubai. How do you pay? Do you use your phone, you use your card, or you are a cash buyer?
I use my phone,
Phone.
Apple Pay.
Last but not the least, biggest lesson building MishiPay?
I think there's a lot of lessons. I don't know if I can pick one right off the bat, but the biggest lesson learning MishiPay, biggest lesson learned building MishiPay, I would say, is that things are not always as they seem, right? I learned in the first couple of years that, the glossy TechCrunch headlines of, this company raised so and so at this valuation wasn't actually what you're chasing while you're building your business, right? That's a headline, and we've had some of those headlines over the years, but the big wins don't come with that. The big wins come with a lot more of the hard work behind the scenes that people don't see, and with real sales, right? So sales matter a lot more than fundraising or valuation. That was a very, very big one for us.
Makes sense. That was fun. That was fun, Mustafa. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for being here. We thoroughly enjoyed. Personally, I loved chatting with you. It was a great learning experience for
Thank
me.
you.
Looking forward to the next one, and all the best for the MishiPay success.
Thank you.
future
Thank
ahead.
you.
For the retailers in GCC, the message is clear. Innovation isn't optional anymore. Your customers are already living digital first lives, and they expect their in-store experiences to match that convenience. But as Mustafa highlighted, it's not about chasing every shiny technology, it's about understanding your customer and solving real problems. And to all the listeners, thank you for tuning in to episode 4 of Let's Talk E-Commerce. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, and share it with anyone in the retail or e-commerce space who might find value in these discussions. Until next time, keep innovative, keep learning, and let's build the future of e-commerce together. Thank you.